So we're here looking at this 2020 Honda Odyssey. Now this vehicle has an adaptive cruise control system, and we can tell that because it's got this little indicator here, and that's the indicator that allows us to adjust the following gap during adaptive cruise control operation. Now this vehicle here was in a front-end collision, and it was repaired and delivered to the customer, and the customer got the vehicle back and said the adaptive cruise is no longer working, and they wanted it looked at. So we got the call to take a look at this vehicle, and I immediately get in it, and I can tell that it's not operating correctly. So we're gonna go ahead and set our cruise control up. I'm gonna try and get up here behind a vehicle, and I'm gonna show you. We're gonna set our distance here, and we're gonna set it at the longest following distance, and we're at 61 miles an hour. And as you guys can see, we're approaching a truck, and it's not gonna brake whatsoever for us. This system is not operating at all. I'm not really quite sure what's wrong with it yet, but I can tell you guys a couple assumptions that I'm gonna make. This system had no codes in it. When the customer returned it back to them, it had no codes stored. Generally speaking, these systems can identify if they are offset just by looking at vehicles on the road and saying, okay, well, we're looking too far to the right. But in this instance, I'm going to make the assumption that this radar is actually pointing straight up. Or not straight up, but it's pointing up to a point where it's looking over vehicles in front of it. And that is really the only time that these things can potentially get on the road for a very long period of time, let's say like a week, and not set a code and disable the system. So again, I'm going to set the cruise control. We're going to hit resume. I'm going to set it. It is set here at 61 miles an hour, and it looks like it is holding this truck. Now we're slowly accelerating, and it was going to allow us to rear end that vehicle. So this is a perfect example of how somebody can get seriously injured if a calibration isn't performed and if these systems aren't checked, and also another indication of how these systems can hurt somebody without setting a code. No identifiers that this system is not operating correctly or that it should be disabled, other than the fact that we almost just rear-ended a pickup truck. All right, we're back on this 2020 Honda Odyssey. We just test drove it. The adaptive cruise control is not operating correctly. It's actually operating unsafe. It would have allowed us to rear-end somebody. We know that this thing didn't set any codes, and we know that because if it sets a code, it's going to disable the system, and while we drove it, it never disabled the system. The customer had this vehicle and drove it for a little while, and it never disabled for them either, which is kind of scary when you think about it. We accessed the front radar. We pulled the covers here in order to get access to the radar to inspect it. Normally, if we were going to perform this calibration, we would put this bubble level right here, and we're going to level the radar. In this instance, we're not even really on level ground, but we can see here that the radar is in fact pointing up, which is why it was unable to see the vehicles in front of us. But it also didn't see anything that it was going to set a code and disable the system because it was looking up at the sky. You can see here, if we pull this back, you can actually see the damage itself. So the adjuster here on the bracket is bent. The bracket itself is pretty tweaked over. You can see where it's bent here and here. And then also the radar body itself is damaged. So we're going to need to put a radar on this vehicle, a radar bracket, and then calibrate it before we get this back out on the road.